You're not going to necessarily invoke divine command if they are not somebody who subscribes to that. So you are armed and dangerous, if you will, with the tools to go that other route with it, because it leads to the same result, right? You could say, hey, game theory suggests that if you keep doing this type of behavior, you're not going to have the best outcomes. That's why you have that Johnny Sins range, you know what I mean? And
so. That's a very important part of being a man. You need to know what you believe and why you believe it. Whether or not you agree with me as a Christian, I have zero respect for you if you have no real world. If you're going to be a man in this world, you need to have a perspective. You need to plant your flag somewhere. Otherwise, you're not a man. You're a boy.
The left will use terms like that, like, hey, addictive personality, or any of the isms. They'll remove agency from themselves and offset that to one of the isms, or, you know, the addictive personality thing, or what have you. And that way they can feel like it's not their fault, which feels better in the moment, but then does not lead to positive outcomes.
I think a lot of this is instinctual, but it gets suppressed by like societies. Like, you should talk about your problems. You know, everybody, you go to a therapist, you take your SSRIs if you feel sad, then it's because you have an imbalance. This kind of thing is degrading the masculinity of our society. Maybe nobody's supposed to save you from it. That's what makes you tougher. That's what makes you harder. You know, like David Goggins, right? You know, surround yourself with men who are hard and be with those men every day.
I think it's time to re-lock in, guys, because we're almost 4 months into the year here, and those of you who are saying like, dude, you're not even gonna recognize me by June. I still recognize you. And we're halfway there, so it's like,
you're still pretty recognizable. As
yeah, right so now. It's like. And one more thing I have on this, and this is kind of what I was talking to you about like last week. What do you do when somebody says, hey, what you're doing is morally wrong, right? And let's say you disagree with that. You say, well, I think it's morally right, you know? And we'll give examples, but I think just generally speaking, what should you do in that case? Like, right? Like what's going on with that?
That's a great question. So for me, you know, for you too, for everybody, it's going to depend on what the question is. Let's, for the sake of discussion, let's assume that it's something that is like gray. You know, like if somebody's like, hey, you should be murdering people. Why aren't you doing that? You don't need to examine that. That's just crazy. Right? Yeah. If somebody gives you like, hey, maybe you shouldn't run the stoplight, maybe that's a little grayer, and that is something you could look at. So I would say that assuming that it's something that's not just totally ridiculous right off the bat, then the first thing you have to do is become self-critical. You need to be able to internalize the criticism, whether or not you agree with it on the face. You must be able to seriously think about it. You know, like, this person said something to me that, and here's the thing, when somebody criticizes you in like a moral way, you're going to immediately push back. Immediately you're going to, it's just an instinct you're going to have to be like, shut up. You know, like, I don't want to hear that. Like, you're a dweeb, or you're some on your high horse or something like that. You're immediately going to push back against it in your mind. So I'd say the number one thing to do is overcome that. Just listen to them. It doesn't mean you have to agree. It doesn't mean you have to change anything. Just listen to what they're saying and then just hear it and sit with it and be like, okay, here comes the criticism. Let me think, you know, is there something to that, you know? And I'd say that's the most difficult part of it, is that. And it can be painful, and it can require maybe a lot of time and a lot of thought. In my case, you know, a lot of prayer to really think about this question. Is it really right, or is it really wrong? But that's the only way you're going to come to a conclusion. So, I mean, after that, once you've internalized it, I don't really think I can give you a prescription anymore, because that's going to come down to you and your own process of like really vetting the idea. But that's how I would respond to it. What about you?
No, that's good. Definitely. I agree with you. Introspect, self-examine, and get into it and get into the weeds, but address it with the severity of the claim, like you said. But I think if it's something such as, like, we can use this one as an example. Let's say you're 20 years old, 21 years old, whatever, and one of us, let's say Dean or I, says, hey, we think you shouldn't be engaging in sexual degeneracy. Like, what should you do, right?
Yeah.
Like, the instinct that you have there is to say, well, it makes me feel good, and I think I should do it, and you don't have a good reason for that other than, you know, whatever you said. I don't agree with it. That's one way to frame it. But really ask, why are they saying that, and what could that be the case, right? Yeah. So if engage with it, and if they don't give you a good reason, I mean, that's a flaw on their end, and I get that, but do you have a reason to be engaging in that level of degeneracy, right? So that's why we disagree with the red pill, right? It's like, we don't think you should be engaging in sexual degeneracy, and they want you to. 100 guys, 100 girls rather. Yeah. So it's like, what do we do about that, right? That's the thing that somebody wants to do something so much, like it's their biological urges, they want to succumb to that, and we're just saying, hey, don't do that. It's not
Right.
that simple, right?
Right.
It's like, I don't know, there's more to it than that.
Yeah, and that's a great example of that's a difficult argument to make from the perspective of like if I'm saying to somebody you should not engage in sexual degeneracy, right? If they believe in God, it's easy. But if they don't, right? Assuming I'm talking to somebody who's like an atheist or whatever, it's very very difficult for me to really strongly make the argument that they shouldn't do that, right? So I'm sort of just relying on them to introspect. That's all I can do is like plant a seed and hope that they're going to introspect. And frankly, I really believe that it's really just going to be time that's going to show them that it's just not worth it, right? I mean that sort of played out a little bit in my own life. Like I've only been Christian in for like a few years now. So before that, I did engage in that kind of thing, and I had to find out that that was not really helpful or beneficial, and it kind of just made me feel worse, ultimately. And I just had to find that out. I mean, no, yeah, people were saying that, but I didn't really give a shit about that. Why do I listen to what you have to say, right? Like, I didn't have the humility to like listen to what they're saying and then play it out in my head, or just maybe just talk to people who've gone through it and then like internalize what they're saying. I didn't have that humility. So, I mean, humility is a very important moral ethic, I guess I should say. So it's a very important ethic. And I think it's for that reason. You have to be able to listen to criticism, no matter how extreme it is, and humor it, give it a chance. Maybe it is correct. Maybe even though it is something that like really grinds your gears when you hear it, that really like feels dumb and you don't want to listen to it, maybe that's like a really important reason to listen to it. At least just think about it. It doesn't mean you have to agree, but just think about it.
No, and that's where I say like it's perfect for, I guess, the balance of power in so far as you and me, the atheist and the orthodox. It's I can talk to somebody at that age and say, hey, from my perspective, let's say as from a materialist perspective, I can tell you like why you shouldn't be doing that, right?
Yep.
And you know that argument, so you can say that if you're just going to match their energy because it's important to you that they know that they don't engage in something that in your mind is morally wrong. So you're going to actually do whatever strategy you can. You're not going to have to say, like you just like you said, you're not going to necessarily invoke divine command if they are not somebody who subscribes to that. So you are engaged, armed and dangerous, if you will, with the tools to equip. You're equipped with those tools to go the other route with it, because it leads to the same result, right? You could say, hey, game theory suggests that if you do this, if you keep doing this type of behavior, like you're not going to, have the best outcomes, and here's why, right? You can go down that route, and it's like that's why you have that kind of Johnny Sins range, you know what I mean? And
yeah. So. Yeah, I don't know who that is, but yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so, and you have that range, so it's like,
yeah,
I think it's important to have that range and that variety of tools to say, okay, this person is a Catholic. Let me argue. Let me try to convince this Catholic that he shouldn't be doing this thing, right? And it's gonna be hard because he's gonna say, well, I'm saying that the Bible says this, that, and the other. Why would I listen to you? You're just some random person. But it could be one of those cases where the Bible didn't explicitly say, what to do about it, and you're left to your own judgment, like the sink urinal distinction, right? Yeah. And then you go down and say, hey, like, okay, what about this and that and the other, right? So it's kind of like you got to be equipped with those tools to kind of go about that route. So yeah, I don't know. It's
that comes with what we were talking about earlier, with like making sure that you have a moral principle that you're grounded in, right? That everybody needs to. I think that that's a very important part of being a man. You need to know what you believe and why you believe it. Right? If nothing else, whether or not you agree with me as a Christian, I have zero respect for you if you have like no real worldview. That's that's boyish, right? If I think of people in my life who I look as like being boyish, right, regardless of what age they are, they all have that in common. Like if I started to ask them like deep moral questions, they wouldn't know the answer. Like they've never thought about it, right? It's childish, really, is what it is. So if you're going to be a man in this world, you need to have a perspective. You need to plant your flag somewhere, right? Otherwise, you're not a man. You're you're something else. You're a boy.
Yeah. No, and I like that. And I guess it segues me into this. When should you be telling people what they should or shouldn't do?
No, that's a good one. Yeah.
That's meta, right? That's a meta question. Like, when should you and when shouldn't you be telling people when they should or shouldn't do things?
Well, I think that there is a time for it. It's not all the time. I mean, a lot of times you need to hold your tongue, frankly. I think a lot of times you need to let people make their own mistakes, because
Yeah.
that is an important part of learning. Um, but it's
People
obviously,
don't.
well, no, it's going to extend into like, if they want to pass laws based on their mistakes they're making, you need to speak up, right? So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
it's a matter of like, how much is it going to infringe upon you? How much is it going to infringe upon them? And then how much do you really care about them, right? Because
Right.
maybe it's like, I see that you're going to really hurt yourself, but I don't care about you that much because you're kind of a stranger, so I'm still
Right.
going to hold my tongue, something like that.
Well, people. I was gonna say people don't respond well to unsolicited advice. They tend to
Yeah.
kind of reject it immediately, and that's a whole other thing. But I actually would like to bring something up that's kind of related to this, and it's one of our subscribers said Melee Rules. He brought up that this term addictive personality and how it's kind of a way that people use to excuse their bad behavior. And he actually
Yeah.
introspected and said, "Hey, I actually do. I'm a victim. I'm guilty of this myself." He said, "Hey, I addictive personality. Like that's just my thing, and that I use to rationalize my addictive behaviors, right?" And I think, and I actually spoke to him off like out of context there about that, and we had a little bit of a conversation about that. And I want to bring that into this. It's that the left will use terms like that, like "Hey, addictive personality" or any of the isms, right? And they'll remove agency from themselves, or ownership rather from themselves, and offset that to one of the isms, or the addictive personality thing, or what have you, and that way they can feel like they didn't. It's not their fault, which feels better in the moment, but then in my mind does not lead to positive outcomes. And the reason I say the left does that is because I want to say the right does that too in some ways, and I'll give you an example. The right will say, a lot of right wingers will say this. Will say, "Hey, the reason I'm not doing well right now in society is because of immigration, or is because of Israel, or whatever," right?
Yeah.
And a lot of that could be maybe true or whatever. But does that mindset ever help you?
Mm-mm. No, no, it doesn't.
So so
Yeah.
so yeah. So where I'm going. So sorry. So yeah. So what I'm saying is like, what I want to double click on is taking ownership for things is very important. And anytime you allow yourself to go down that route of ism, like when I say ism, I mean like, oh, it's I failed because of racism, I failed because of transphobism, I failed because of Islamism or whatever,
Yeah.
I failed because of addictive personality. You're not allowing yourself a gateway to introspect and say, well, let's suppose that it was 100% my fault, and what can I do better for the next opportunity, right? Same way with immigration, same way with Israel, all that stuff. It's like, maybe it's true that there's some degree that person is racist and that's why you didn't get the job, but if you just assume the opposite, you're not going to ever be hurt, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you
Yeah.
assume the truth, let's say it is true. If you assume that, could hurt you, because then you could force yourself to not introspect. See where I'm going
Yeah.
with this?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you're advocating for, like an extreme humility, right, or extreme ownership.
Extreme ownership, yeah.
Yeah. And I fully agree with you. And yeah, I mean, the conservatives are just as guilty of this, right? I mean,
In
Facebook,
different ways.
or X are just like cesspools sometimes. Like you see certain conservative opinions, and it's like it's exactly the same thing that you see on the left. Like they want to be victims. People want to feel like they're victims. And I think I've said this before. Everybody thinks that they're the Rebel Alliance in Star Wars, right? Nobody thinks that they're the Empire, but somebody is the Empire. And like everybody can't be a freaking victim, and you shouldn't see yourself like that. It's not healthy. It's not healthy to want to be a victim. So, refuse to be a victim. That's what I try to do in my life, right? Like, unfair stuff happens. I mean, the world is not fair. You're going to be you're going to be tread upon sometimes. I mean, you're not Elon Musk. You're not Donald Trump. You don't have all this power to do anything you want to do. Somebody's going to get their way over you sooner or later at some point in your life. And you can choose to sit there and have pity for yourself and feel like a victim. But in my view, that's immoral. It's immoral what you're doing, because you're like giving up. It's like you're just failing to reckon with the reality that the world is not fair. Like that's something that you should already know. It's just, yeah, things are unfair sometimes. That's just something you got to deal with, man. But you complain about it as it happens, sure. Bitch about it. Do whatever you got to do. But you need to move on, and you need to not see yourself as a victim. Otherwise, that is immoral behavior in my view. It's a weakness.
Yeah. No, I like that. And the reason I bring that up is because it's in the vein of what should you do, right? And this is something you
Yes.
shouldn't do. You shouldn't adopt mindsets okay, it's one thing to recognize that, yeah, maybe let's I'm going to say this as somebody. Let's okay. Racism is real. Let's say that. Okay. Let's assume that. It's one thing to recognize that that's real, right? And it's one thing to recognize. Okay, yeah, there's certain people that are racist and like you can't change their view and that's whatever. But you don't. And then again, the same thing with like immigration. Immigration is bad right now. It's in a very bad spot, right? Illegal immigration is causing a lot of problems. But can I admit that that's true, but also say, hey, that's not that there's I don't benefit from saying, hey, I can't get this job because it's there's too much competition because of illegal immigration, right? Yeah,
Right.
that may be true, but or not, but it doesn't really affect that dog in you that needs to be in you, that so you can
Right.
get a better job and get successful in life. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I think a lot of people are just unsuccessful, and they need something to blame for that, because the world doesn't make sense if they blame themselves for everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it's more painful to blame yourself too, right? Like it's easy and it feels good to blame other people, which is why everybody wants to do it, you know. And
Yeah.
if you're introspecting, you're constantly zeroing in on your own weaknesses and your own flaws. That's not too fun. I mean, it can lead to depression. Maybe it's a bit of an info hazard to be doing that all the time, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's part of being a man. You know, I think a lot of this is instinctual. So we're probably not saying anything that people haven't already thought about, but I do think it gets suppressed, right? Like this idea of like, as a man, I need to just sort of deal with my own problems, and I don't want to appear weak. That is a good thing. You should feel that way, right? That's correct. It gets suppressed by like societies, like you should talk about your problems. You know, everybody, you go to a therapist, take your SSRIs. If you feel sad, then it's because you have an imbalance. You know, like this kind of thing is degrading the masculinity of our society, which is a big problem that we have. So I guess I would just say, keep touch with that part of yourself. It is part of who you are. It is a manly way that you have to live. Being a man sometimes is a matter of solitude. It's a matter of like just enduring the harshness, you know, like nobody really can come save you from it. Maybe nobody's supposed to save you from it. That's what makes you tougher. That's what makes you harder. You know, like David Goggins, right? You know, surround yourself with men who are hard and be with those men every day, you know, and
Right.
be a hard man. That's what you gotta do.
Reject modernity and embrace masculinity in the sense
Yeah.
that what Gus Fring says it pretty well. A man provides, you know, even when he's not loved.
Yes.
So it's something where I think again there are people again making excuses for things, and I get that, and it feels good. But think about this situation, and I'm triple clicking on this on purpose because this is in my mind one of the most important things of what should you do.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and we'll wrap it up here in a minute and tie that back into morality and broader scheme of things. But if you have two scenarios, and one is two people get fired from the same company, the same job, and one person says, "Hey, my boss was racist, so they fired me," and the other person says, "Hey, I had an attendance issue, so I got fired." Who is more likely to get a better job quicker?
The guy who took ownership.
Yeah. I mean, I set that up with an obvious one to make it simple, but
Yeah.
if you just say, "Hey, I'm dismissing this because my boss is racist," you're never going to think, "Well, what if he wasn't racist and I just actually was late too many times in a row, and I need to work on something, like maybe I need to fix my car." It could be something simple, fix my alarm clock, whatever, or fix my, get after it in a way where I need to start going to bed earlier. It's like, that's a very, very simplified example, and people are going to say, "Well, it's oversimplified." I did that on purpose because it's a thought experiment, so get after it. But that's where I'm saying, if we go back to our original content where we're talking about locking in a lot, and I think it's time to re-lock in, guys, because we are 3 months in, we're almost 4 months into the year here, and like it's almost a quarter. It's almost a quarter over. And those of you who are saying like, "Dude, you're not even going to recognize me by June," I still recognize you, and we're halfway there. So it's like,
You're still pretty recognizable as of right
so
now.
it's
Yeah.
so we need to, guys, we really need to lock back in. I think that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And again, with the frame of morality, it sounds kind of like we're talking about something abstract here, but it applies to everyday things like, should I be eating a freak meals? You know, you should be, right?
Yeah.
It's morally good for many reasons, right? It's not gluttonous. You're talking about maximizing the amount of nutrition you need with a minimal amount of like money and effort and time. Get involved into it, dude. Freak out with that stuff. It's freak mode month, okay?
That's right, man. That's right. I'm pumped up from that little speech just now, man. I'm ready to run through this wall, man. What's up, guys? Thanks for checking out this clip from the Maneuver Life podcast. If you enjoyed it, consider liking and subscribing and leaving a comment. even if it's just because you want to tell us how dumb you think we are, but especially if you want to tell us how much you agree with what we were saying. We have weekly uploads every single Monday, long-form conversations just like this one. So consider checking it out one way or the other. Thank you so much for your attention. You have a good rest of your day.